June 6, 1992 began with bright skies and a palpable buzz over Springfield, Missouri. For the city's high schools, it was graduation day, the long-awaited culmination of 4 years of anticipation. The streets and neighborhoods hummed with movement, families carrying flowers, students dressed in caps and gowns, the soft click of cameras trying to preserve the moment before it slipped away. At Kickapoo High School, where Suzanne, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall graduated, the air was electric. Parents, siblings, and friends gathered, voices overlapping in laughter, congratulations, and the occasional tearful embrace. Suzie, just 19, was radiant with a smile that seemed to capture her excitement about life beyond the classroom. Blonde, outgoing, and adventurous, she shared a close bond with her mother, Sherrill Levitt, who had always been her rock. Stacy McCall, 18, carried the same bright energy, cheerful, dependable, the kind of friend whose optimism could lighten even the heaviest of days. The two girls, inseparable in their final year of school, walked side by side down the aisle, their gowns swaying, their names called to an eruption of applause from the crowd. For Sherrill, 47, the day was more than just about her daughter's graduation. It was about stability. She had recently purchased a modest single-story home at 1717 East Delmar Street, creating a haven for herself and Suzie. Sherrill had endured hardships, a divorce, the struggles of raising a daughter alone, but the house represented a new beginning, a safe foundation for their future. That night, she stayed home, leaving the girls to their celebrations, but she was proud, quietly reassured that Suzie had a bright future ahead. As evening descended, the city's teenagers spilled into parties scattered across Springfield. Suzie and Stacy drifted between several gatherings, the night unfolding in a blur of chatter, music, and shared nostalgia. They laughed over inside jokes, posed for pictures with classmates, and talked about the months ahead. Both girls were set to attend Southwest Missouri State University, a fact that added a layer of comfort. Their friendship would endure beyond the walls of Kickapoo High, but graduation nights are often fluid, with plans shifting as energy ebbs and flows. At one party, the heat and noise became overwhelming. At another, the crowd grew larger than expected, bodies pressed together in small spaces, voices loud enough to drown out any real conversation. Somewhere along the way, Suzie and Stacy grew tired. Their original plan had been to spend the night at a friend's house, but by the early hours, the idea of cramming into a house full of restless teenagers lost its appeal. They wanted quiet. Around 2 a.m., they made a final decision. They would return to Suzie's home. It was close, comfortable, and far more inviting than the chaos of a crowded living room. For Stacy, who had promised her mother she would check in once she settled somewhere safe, the arrangement seemed perfect. And for Suzie, it meant going back to the place where her mother, Sherrill, would be asleep, the familiar walls of 1717 East Delmar shielding them from the world outside. The drive back was calm. The streets of Springfield, usually buzzing with activity, had fallen into silence. Streetlights cast long shadows across sidewalks, illuminating the occasional parked car, the flicker of a porch bulb, or the dark silhouette of a sleeping house. The two girls, likely exhausted, must have looked forward to slipping into bed, shoes kicked off, makeup washed away, ready to collapse after one of the most significant days of their lives. At 2:15 a.m., the house on East Delmar appeared as it always did, modest, tidy, and unremarkable. Sherrill's blue 1989 Ford Escort sat parked outside, its presence a sign she was inside, asleep. Suzie's red Ford Escort and Stacy's Toyota Corolla soon joined it in the driveway. The neighborhood was quiet. No shouting, no strange noises, no signs of disturbance. Just another night in a middle-class suburb where the most common sound was a dog barking at shadows. Inside, Sherrill likely stirred at the faint creak of the front door, her daughter arriving home late but safely. Or perhaps she slept through it entirely, unaware that this would be the last time she, her daughter, and Stacy were seen alive. The small details of that night, the decision to go home, the stillness of the neighborhood, the 3 vehicles parked neatly outside, would later haunt investigators. Nothing about it suggested danger. There was no storm, no commotion, no neighbor's account of raised voices or suspicious cars. It was ordinary in every sense. But in the span of a few hours, sometime between the moment Suzie and Stacy arrived and the first attempts to contact them the next morning, something extraordinary happened. Something powerful enough to erase 3 women from the face of the earth without leaving a trace. For now, though, the city of Springfield slept. The porch light outside 1717 East Delmar flickered faintly, illuminating a home where 3 women should have been safe. No one watching could have guessed that the night's silence would soon transform into decades of unanswered questions. You're watching Trace of Evil, where we reveal true crimes, unsolved disappearances, and mysteries surrounding crime. Like and subscribe to watch more episodes from our channel. Let's get back into the story of the Springfield Three. The morning of June 7, 1992, broke like any other in Springfield. The sun rose steadily, washing over suburban rooftops, catching dew on trimmed lawns, and filtering through curtains of sleeping families. For most households, it was a calm Sunday morning, the day after the celebration. Parents sipped coffee, children slept in, and the town collectively exhaled after the rush of graduation festivities. But inside 1717 East Delmar Street, silence stretched unnaturally. By 8 a.m., the house should have stirred with routine activity, the sound of Sherrill flipping through the newspaper, or the muffled footsteps of 2 teenagers slowly rising after a late night. Yet no one emerged. Stacy's mother, Janice McCall, had expected a phone call from her daughter. The night before, Stacy had reassured her that she would let her know where she ended up. That call never came. As the morning wore on, Janice grew restless. By mid-morning, her unease tipped into worry. This wasn't like Stacy. Responsible, grounded, and dependable. She didn't simply vanish without a word. Janice began making calls, first to friends who had been at the parties, then to parents of classmates. Each conversation brought the same answer. No one had seen or heard from Stacy since the previous night. As hours passed, her concern deepened. By noon, her worry had sharpened into dread. Something wasn't right. Meanwhile, at the Delmar residence, the signs of absence were subtle but troubling. Neighbors noted that Sherrill's Ford Escort hadn't moved from its spot in the driveway. Suzie's car and Stacy's Corolla were also parked neatly nearby. To a casual observer, it looked as though all 3 women were home. But there was no sound, no activity, only the stillness of a house that should have been filled with movement. By early afternoon, Janice decided to act. She and other family members made their way to the house on Delmar Street. What they found inside would unsettle them for years to come. The front door was unlocked, unusual for Sherrill, who was known to be cautious. Once inside, the scene appeared deceptively normal at first glance. The living room bore no signs of chaos, no overturned furniture, no shattered glass. Yet a closer look revealed chilling details. The women's purses were still in the house, lined neatly in the living room as if set down upon arrival. Their keys were inside, along with cigarettes that Sherrill never went without. Even Suzie's dog, a small Yorkshire Terrier named Cinnamon, was still there. Agitated and restless, the dog barked incessantly, darting around as though something had disturbed it in the night. In the bedrooms, the signs of normality clashed with the eerie sense of abandonment. The beds had not been slept in. Makeup, clothes, and personal belongings were scattered in ways suggesting the women had only just arrived home before vanishing. The television in the living room was on, its screen filled with static, an image frozen in time humming into the silence. Janice, standing in the house, felt dread coil tighter in her chest. Something was wrong, something unexplainable. But instead of immediately calling the police, friends and family hesitated. It was the early 1990s, a time before constant communication, when a missed call or an unlocked door didn't instantly suggest abduction. In their minds, maybe the women had stepped out briefly, maybe they'd gone for a walk, or maybe they were at another gathering. Still, doubts lingered. As the afternoon gave way to evening, more people filtered into the Delmar residence. Friends, relatives, even neighbors wandered through the house, searching for answers, leaving behind a troubling consequence. The crime scene, if it was one, was irreparably compromised. Fingerprints, footprints, and potential evidence were disturbed, blurred by dozens of well-meaning visitors. The sense of urgency was there, but the instinct to preserve the house as untouched never came. It wasn't until later that day, as the sun sank low and darkness crept back over Springfield, that police were finally contacted. When officers arrived, they encountered a baffling situation. 3 women, all vanishing simultaneously, leaving behind cars, purses, and a barking dog, without a single clear sign of struggle. Detectives walked the rooms methodically, noting what they saw: the unlocked door, the static-filled television, the untouched beds, the lined-up purses. Each detail suggested the women had planned to stay, that they were home for the night. But none of it explained why they were gone. For the investigators, the lack of physical evidence was staggering. There were no bloodstains, no forced entry, no broken windows. Whatever had happened had occurred cleanly, silently, and with precision. It was as if the 3 women had simply dissolved into the air. As word spread, Springfield began to stir uneasily. By nightfall, rumors spread quickly across neighborhoods and schools. Parents held their children closer. Teenagers, who had just been celebrating freedom and new beginnings, whispered about the fragility of safety. The house on East Delmar was no longer just another suburban home. It was now the center of a mystery that seemed unexplainable. In the span of 24 hours, Springfield had shifted. The joy of graduation had given way to whispers of dread. Families locked their doors tighter, neighbors exchanged nervous glances, and police quietly admitted what no one wanted to hear. There were no answers, only silence, heavy and suffocating, inside a house that should have been a sanctuary. When the Springfield Police Department took on the case of the missing women, they were immediately aware of the weight of what they were facing. Missing adults were not uncommon, and often there were simple explanations: a family dispute, an unannounced trip, a teenage runaway. But this was different. 3 women of 3 different ages had disappeared simultaneously, leaving behind all of their personal belongings. The investigation began with urgency. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors, questioning residents about anything unusual from the night before. Had anyone heard screams? Seen a strange car? Witnessed movement around the house? One by one, neighbors shook their heads. The night had been silent. Not a single report of shouting, breaking glass, or suspicious activity surfaced. Then came the troubling realization: the house had been compromised, with friends and relatives moving freely through the residence before police were alerted. Any physical evidence had been disturbed. Footprints were smudged. Potential fingerprints were covered. Even cigarette butts found outside might have belonged to visitors rather than a perpetrator. Detectives knew they were already working from a disadvantage. Despite this, investigators pressed forward. The women's backgrounds were examined in detail. Sherrill was a respected cosmetologist, a dedicated mother with no known enemies. Suzie was bright, social, and well-liked among peers. Stacy was considered responsible, polite, and cautious. None had criminal records, troubled histories, or associations with dangerous people. The absence of motive deepened the mystery. As days passed, leads trickled in, each one carrying a flicker of hope, each one dissolving under scrutiny. One early tip suggested the women had been spotted at a truck stop on Interstate 44. Another claimed they had been seen walking along a highway, appearing disoriented. Both reports were investigated thoroughly, neither producing evidence. Meanwhile, the McCall and Streeter families were thrust into the nightmare of public attention. News crews camped outside their homes. Flyers with the women's photographs were plastered across Springfield, on telephone poles, grocery store bulletin boards, and the walls of gas stations. Their faces became fixtures in the community, familiar yet haunting. The FBI was soon brought in, expanding the search beyond Springfield. The case drew comparisons to abductions in other states, though no clear connection was ever established. Helicopters scanned wooded areas, dive teams explored nearby lakes, and search dogs combed through fields. Still, no trace of Sherrill, Suzie, or Stacy surfaced. One theory suggested the women had been victims of a random break-in gone wrong. Perhaps they had surprised an intruder inside the house and were forced away at gunpoint. Yet the lack of forced entry contradicted this. The front door being unlocked pointed to the possibility that they had opened it willingly, either for someone they knew or under the guise of trust. Then came reports of a suspicious van. Several witnesses described seeing a late-model Dodge van in the area during the early hours of June 7th. Some claimed to have seen a man inside watching the neighborhood. Others remembered vague shapes moving near the Delmar home. For weeks, the mysterious van dominated the investigation, with police urging residents to report any sightings. But despite the attention, the van was never located, and the lead evaporated. As weeks turned into months, the case grew colder. Theories multiplied. Some speculated the women had been abducted by someone with knowledge of their routines. Others believed it was a targeted crime, perhaps involving someone from Sherrill's past or a hidden grudge. Still others whispered about serial offenders traveling through the Midwest, opportunistic predators who struck quickly and vanished. For investigators, frustration mounted. Every promising lead collapsed. Every suspect was cleared. The sheer absence of physical evidence gnawed at the case. It was as though the women had been carefully erased. Meanwhile, Springfield itself began to change. The disappearance of the 3 women cast a shadow over the community. Parents forbade their children from staying out late. Locks were changed. Security systems were installed in homes that had never needed them before. The notion of safety, so deeply rooted in suburban life, had been shattered. The police, under mounting pressure, expanded their interviews. They questioned former boyfriends, distant relatives, even casual acquaintances. They traced every phone call, every sighting, every rumor. They interrogated hundreds of people, each line of questioning ending the same way: nothing. The media dubbed them the Springfield Three, a title that would come to define the case. Coverage spread beyond Missouri, captivating national audiences. Television specials, newspaper editorials, and radio segments carried the story, each time reigniting hope that someone, somewhere, might hold the missing piece. Yet with every passing week, the trail grew colder. The summer heat gave way to autumn chill, and the mystery of June 7th remained frozen in place. Families clung to hope, but investigators privately admitted they were baffled. Without evidence, without witnesses, and without motive, the case teetered between the realm of fact and haunting speculation. And still, in the quiet house on East Delmar, the television that once buzzed with static was remembered as the final eerie detail of that night. A symbol of interruption, of something unfinished, and of 3 lives paused, leaving behind only questions. As weeks blurred into years, the case of the Springfield Three slipped into the space between active investigation and legend. Leads dwindled, but theories grew, whispered at dinner tables, discussed in news reports, and dissected in late-night conversations across Missouri. With no evidence and no bodies, the possibilities seemed endless. One of the earliest and most persistent theories pointed to a targeted abduction. Perhaps the women had opened the door that night to someone they knew, a friend, a neighbor, or a familiar face. Investigators considered this seriously. There were no signs of forced entry, and Sherrill was cautious by nature. It seemed unlikely she would have let a stranger inside at 2 a.m. unless she trusted them. The theory suggested a betrayal, someone close enough to be welcomed, but dangerous enough to orchestrate their disappearance. Another possibility was a random crime of opportunity. Springfield, though a quiet city, sat at the crossroads of major highways, Interstate 44 and U.S. Route 65. Truck stops, motels, and transient travelers moved constantly through the area. Some investigators theorized that the women had been targeted by a drifter or serial offender, someone who spotted them late at night and acted swiftly. In this version, the mysterious van sightings loomed large, a ghostly vehicle that hovered in and out of witness statements, never conclusively tied to the crime. As time wore on, names began to surface. One of the most notorious was Robert Craig Cox, a convicted kidnapper and suspected serial offender. At the time of the disappearance, Cox was living in Springfield and had a troubling history of violence against women. Years later, while imprisoned in Texas, he gave an interview claiming he knew the Springfield Three were dead. He suggested their bodies would never be found, though he refused to reveal details. Investigators could never confirm his involvement, but his chilling statements cemented him in the narrative. Another lead centered on a local man named Dustin Richtenwald and his associates, who had ties to organized crime in the area. Rumors swirled about drug connections, debts, and retaliation, fueling speculation that the women had been silenced after witnessing something they should not have. Yet again, evidence never materialized. Over time, other strange tips surfaced. Psychics reached out with visions. Anonymous letters claimed the women had been buried under concrete foundations or hidden in remote fields. One particularly disturbing theory suggested their remains were entombed beneath a parking garage in Springfield. Ground-penetrating radar later revealed anomalies beneath the structure, but excavation was never conducted, leaving the theory unresolved and debated to this day. As the years dragged forward, the families of Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy lived in a limbo few could imagine. Every holiday was marked by absence. Every birthday was a painful reminder of milestones that would never be reached. Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, became an outspoken advocate, dedicating her life to finding answers not only for her daughter, but for countless other missing persons. She kept the story alive, refusing to let the women be forgotten. The case left its mark on Springfield itself. The quiet Midwestern city was no longer defined by its safety or suburban comfort, but by a shadow, the unsolved mystery that lingered on every street corner and in every whispered conversation. The house at 1717 East Delmar became a symbol of loss, attracting curious passersby and even amateur investigators desperate to glimpse the site of the disappearance. Law enforcement, too, was reshaped by the case. The mistakes of the early hours, the compromised crime scene, the delay in calling police, the flood of well-meaning visitors, became cautionary tales for future investigations. Training across the state began emphasizing the importance of immediate scene control, ensuring no detail was lost before experts could arrive. Despite decades of searching, the Springfield Three have never been found. Their disappearance remains one of the most haunting cold cases in American history, a story that feels less like a crime and more like an intrusion of the inexplicable. To this day, the case stirs debate. Was it a carefully planned abduction, a random act of violence, or something far darker hidden in the undercurrents of a seemingly quiet city? In the end, the Springfield Three became more than victims of a crime. They became symbols of fragility, of unanswered questions, of the lives torn away in an instant. Their faces, captured in high school yearbooks and family photographs, continue to stare out from posters, news articles, and memorials, asking the same silent question that investigators, families, and communities have been unable to answer for over 3 decades. What happened in that quiet house on East Delmar Street? And why did 3 women, a mother, a daughter, and a friend, vanish without leaving behind a trace?